You're listening to the Footy First podcast on TSN 1050. Champions live here.
That's right, folks. It's Saturday. And if you are in the GTA, it is a very, very snowy Saturday morning. But we're here. I made it into the studio. Niko is unavailable this week. He is down on his team's preseason trip. So he will not be joining us today. He did send in his picks, though, so don't worry. At the end of the show, you will see his picks. But Nick McVicar here, holding down the fort, keeping you guys up to date on everything in the Canadian soccer world. We have MLS Week 1 action. We're going to be joined later by one of the newest international Canadian players, Holly O'Neill, at around 10:15. And then we're going to talk more Canadian soccer. And let's start with the biggest news from around Canada this week, and that's Canadian soccer president Nick Bontis resigning. Kind of came out of nowhere. Personally, I'm shocked he stayed on this long. But with everything going on, it's not really a shock to say that he was going to eventually step down. And we're getting more news as it comes out, of course, what was going on, what was happening, and why he resigned. So the questions begin to arise is, how much of this should be put on Nick Bontis' shoulders? And it's hard to say, because you look at it from a outsider perspective, you don't really get the full story. And he was brought in for one reason and one reason only, and that was to run the business side of Soccer Canada. Bontis was not a soccer person to begin with, and there's no real shock that it's hard to run a soccer program when you aren't a soccer person at all. So he steps down. We get a new president in place. And before I say who it is, can I just say I'm a little shocked that they announced somebody so quickly? This is a big deal, the president of Soccer Canada. This is a massive position for the growth of the game in Canada. And I don't want to take anything away from who they named. And they named former Olympian Charmaine Crooks as the new president of Soccer Canada. She was holding the vice presidency role. And by the way, first female and only just the second black person to be named to the role, which is phenomenal stuff. I really do think that she could be the right fit. I am just shocked that they made the announcement so fast after Bontis' resignation. He resigned on Monday, and they named her the replacement, full-out replacement, not interim, nothing like that, full-out replacement on Wednesday. Listen, I could be overthinking this just a little bit, but with everything that's gone on over the past 18 months for Canada soccer, with the men's team having all the success that they've had, with the women's team having all the success that they've had going back to the Olympic win, with all of the controversy surrounding both teams over the last year, you think they might want to take a little bit of time to make sure that the person stepping in is 100% the right person. And again, there is a very good chance that Crooks could be the right person for this job. I'm not taking anything away from her herself. It is not a shot at her. But there is lots of question marks surrounding this role in Soccer Canada at the moment. And the fact that they just decided, okay, we are going to name somebody less than 72 hours after the president resigns is a lot to me. Had they named her interim president, I would have understood that maybe a little bit more, just because you're looking at it from a perspective of, all right, we have somebody in place. We're going to do a full search. This person might end up getting the role. But to just name her outright kind of confused me. Again, there's a very good chance that she will be the exact right person that we need. There's no way to know until we see what she can do in the job. But as of right now, it just seems very odd to go out of your way to name outright a new president. And then, of course, later in the week, we get the news that Canada Soccer has struck an interim compensation deal with the women's team. Now, the wording of this is a little odd, but basically what it is, folks, is that Canada Soccer and the women's national team have come up with a compensation plan for 2022. Not this year. No. That is still on the table, still trying to be figured out. But they have come up with a compensation plan for last season where there was obviously some compensation issues. And we know it was not just the women's team, it was the men's team as well, but the women's team definitely got it worse. The men's team already had their conversations about 2022, and they got a lot of their issues from last year sorted. This year, again, a whole nother thing. And those talks are still going to have to be ongoing because we're not at a place where both teams or anyone in Canada Soccer on the players' side can comfortably say that they are making what they should be making. And it's a huge issue. There's lots of questions to be had. But the fact that there is some sort of positive step forward is a good thing. So I don't want to rip on that. We have to take it for what it's worth. There was so many issues going into these conversations. That's why the women went on strike for a few days prior to the She Believes Cup, and then had Canada Soccer not threatened to sue the players, which would have put the players in a really bad spot because they don't make a ton of money to begin with, most of them. We probably still would be on strike with our Canadian women's national team. And pending how that goes, there's men's games coming up later in March that could also be construed as a potential strike moment for the men's national team if their needs are also not met. So the fact that we have a compensation plan for last season, which was one of the issues that was brought up by the women, that's a positive step forward. But it is also a minor step forward. There is still so much that needs to be done ahead of the Women's World Cup this summer and ahead of the Men's National League game or Nations League games, and ahead of any qualifications for anything for either of these two squads over the next 12 to 18 months. There is a lot that needs to be done, and there is a lot that will get done. But we're looking at it from a positive point right now, is that one compensation plan, good. We're on the right track. The women still have lots of questions. And you can't blame them. The budgets have been cut for 3 straight years for both the men's and women's national programs. The women are in a World Cup season. We can't just give them the bare minimum anymore. It's not okay. So we have to kind of figure out how we have to find that spot where everyone can be okay. There's serious labor concerns right now that the men and women don't get paid for their name, image, and likeness on anything sold by Canada Soccer. that boggles my mind that that's the case, but that's where we're at right now with our national program. It's not a joke. It needs to be figured out. And yes, are the players potentially asking for too much as well? Of course. There's two sides to every story. But the fact that we're at this point where positive steps are being taken, there's lots of communication between the two sides, I believe is a very positive note for Canada Soccer and the women's and men's national programs and youth programs as well. But it was a busy week for Canada Soccer. It was a busy week in MLS as well and the CPL. Lots of movement for players. We saw Caden Chung. He got a mutually agreed termination of his contract with TFC. Looks like he's signing in Vancouver. You have more players kind of signing all over the league in the CPL. You got all these teams are in training camp now. It's exciting. We're just over a month away from the kickoff. And the MLS action has begun. And while the first week was not the best in terms of performances for the three Canadian teams, and I'll break it down a little bit more in about 20 minutes. There were some positives as well. TFC got out to a 2-1 lead. Vancouver got out to a lead as well. Two come-from-behind losses for both of those teams. Montreal, there's some question marks, and I kind of brought it up last week, is how much can we trust a back line who a lot of people think overachieved last season and had a great season, don't get me wrong, but they overachieved. And it's a lot of question marks. So I'll break it all down in about 20 minutes time, a little bit more with the MLS. Don't forget, we will give our predictions at the end. Niko has sent them in because I am riding solo today. But coming up after the break, one of the newest Canadians playing in Europe on the women's side, Holly O'Neill of IBV in Iceland, will join us over the phone. Really excited to talk to Holly, talk about her experiences playing in U Sports in Canada, as well as League One, and how she managed to turn that into a professional contract in Iceland. We'll get into all that on the other side. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar riding solo today. Niko in training camp. But you don't have to listen to me for the next segment by myself. We are joined now by the newest signing of IBV in Iceland, Holly O'Neill. Holly, how's it going today?
Good.
That's good to
Not
hear.
a bad day. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's a little snowy here. We got about 30 centimeters of snow in the GTA, so I bet you don't miss that right now.
No, I actually just got back from a round of golf, so.
Oh, that's just mean. It took me an hour. It took me an hour to clear off my driveway today, so you're lucky. So Holly, you are one of the newest signings over in Europe of Canadians, which is a fantastic accomplishment. And you've come from a different path than most of the players that have gone to Europe in the past. You went through U Sports, League One Ontario, and now you're playing in Iceland. Tell the fans that were listening about kind of how that pathway gave you your start and how it's helped you get to where you are.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I definitely did take a unique pathway, that's for sure. And for those who don't know, I'm from Newfoundland, so very small province. And yeah, so I started off in youth sports. I mean, the university I played with when I originally joined, they were one of the top 10 in Canada. So like, it's a good university. Anyways, in my final year there, I had a really good performance, definitely my best in my 5 years. So that was a good way to go out.
Absolutely.
And then from there, I didn't really have much knowledge on League One previous to that because we don't have that back home. And Randy Ribeiro, he reached out to me because he was a player with the University of Santa Fe, which played in the same kind of division as my university. So he was familiar with like the AUS side of it. And he asked me to join Electric City, which they wanted to operate as like a professional team, which I think is still kind of what they're striving for whenever the women break into that. Anyway, so went there. I think I had a pretty good performance there as well, and kind of just got footage and a bit more recognition. And then, yeah, I found an agent that found me a team here in Iceland. That's pretty much it.
That experience of getting that call about your first professional contract, what was that like? Was it your agent who called you? Was it somebody else? Like, how did that go down?
So it was my agent that called me, and at first I didn't really know what to think because we had spoke a couple times. There was some interest from like second division Portugal, and prior to that, he did ask me. He was like, "How would you feel about going to Iceland?" I was a little hesitant at first just because where I came from Newfoundland, I was like, okay, well, I just came from an island. The last thing I want to do is go back to an island.
Fair.
But he kind of explained to me that Iceland is a really good pathway to even bigger, I guess, leagues in Europe. And he had a few clients that kind of came through there and went up through. So after discussing, like, I guess, kind of like having that conversation with him, I was really intrigued by it. And then I had the interview with the coach and some of the staff, and that went well. And then they forwarded on the contract, and I was like, whoa, I'm going to Iceland, I guess.
That's got to be a surreal moment when you get that contract in front of you and you're like, all right, this is what's happening, right?
I swear it actually didn't even like kind of sink in until I was on the plane ride over. It all happened so fast. It was like a blink of an eye.
Yeah, so I mean, we've spoken with Niko about this before, but how fast does these kind of things progress? How fast did it happen for you?
Pretty fast. So back when I first left U Sport and I started in League One, it was kind of there that I realized, like, you know what, I can make the next step to the professional level. So I think it was like halfway through the season, I was like, hey, I want to make this jump. Let's make it happen. And I didn't know how fast it would happen. So I was actually looking for another League One team at the time when the contract came, because I figured it was going to be probably like another season before I even hear anything. But no, it happens pretty quick. Like I guess you could say it was like 3 or 4 months, and I seen my first contract.
Wow, that's incredible. In conversation with Holly O'Neill, IBV's newest Canadian signing, and Holly, you mentioned your success at the U Sports level, and you kind of underplayed it a little bit there when you were saying it. But 12 goals in your senior season, in 12 matches with an assist. You throw that to your time with Electric City, 9 goals in 18 matches in your first season in League One. Kind of tell the people about what makes you such a lethal goal scorer right now.
So my university season, I actually played the 9, which is where I think I had the most success. And I just kind of had it driven in my head at a very young age to attack the box. That's my quote from my coach. Because I think if you look at the statistics, I can't remember exactly what they are now, but the percentage of goals obviously scored within the box are a lot higher than from like outside the 18. So I just kind of I have that mindset, and if I do drive in, like worst case scenario, I'm getting tackled, it's a PK. Like I've practiced my PKs, I got those down pretty solid, I think. And then if not, you're at least getting a shot off or a deflection or assist or something. So that's my mindset. That's my kind of frame of mind. And then when I played with Electric City, I played on the wing. So it was a bit more of a defensive role. But even then, like I still took my opportunities when I could, or I've tried to find somebody that was another scoring option.
Yeah, well, it worked. I mean, 9 goals in 18 matches is not a bad way to go about your first season in League One.
No, yeah. I felt a little insecure about it at first, but now looking back at it, I'm like, okay, you know what? That was my first season, and I was playing on the wing, and there's a lot of factors that play in. But
Absolutely.
I appreciate you saying that.
Well, I mean, the stats speak for themselves. It's very easy. You had an over 60% shots on target rate in university. Like, those stats don't go unnoticed, and I mean, it helped you get a professional contract, so it's something to be proud of.
Yeah. I definitely am. I don't think I could have went out in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you had to kind of switch positions with Electric City, and I mean, there was a lot going on with Electric City last year, obviously, some controversy as well. How difficult was it to make that transition from the island to come to Ontario and then go through the transition of positions and all the controversy going around the club?
Okay, so my first time moving to Ontario was actually my first time ever leaving home. So I struggled more moving to Ontario than I did to Iceland, funny enough. As for the transition of positions for most of my university career, I actually did play as a winger because the striker that was playing there before me, she was like a first team All-Canadian almost every year. Like, you know what I mean? So I was kind of graduating into that position. So I was familiar with the wing, and I was kind of happy to be there because I like to operate in space. I'm big with 1v1s. I love taking on players. So I was happy to go out there. But again, I did have to kind of, adjust back, and I had to learn like a whole new team, their playing style. So it was a lot to take in.
For sure. No, I can only imagine. And I bet the style of soccer, period, is different from where you're from to Ontario. Like, I know we play a very hard-nosed game here in Ontario. I haven't played many Atlantic provinces, but was it similar?
Honestly, it wasn't too big of a jump, especially with like the coaches I had, because my coach at home, I like to call him very European style, more like probably like EPL. Like he likes to play.
That's good.
You know, we're not just kick and run. You're working it out of the back. We're working into the midfield. He sets his platforms. And when I joined Electric City, Randy liked to operate the same. He wanted to try to play, even if maybe it wasn't the best decision.
Nothing wrong with that, as long as it's consistent, right?
No, exactly. Yeah, no, it was good. I like that we tried to play, though. And that will be one big adjustment I've already noticed here with the playing style in Iceland. They're more direct, a lot more direct.
Yeah.
Not necessarily kick and run, because the girls are technically very good. They still like to play around the back, but you got to be fit. There's no question. There's no way around it.
That's got to be an adjustment. In conversation with Holly O'Neill, IBV's newest striker, and you mentioned the adjustments to make in Iceland. How has that kind of gone for you? I know you've been out there for about a month now, maybe a few weeks. How has that gone for you, and what have you noticed most about the team that you're with?
Okay, so I've been here a month now. Unfortunately, I've missed the first 2 preseason games because I'm waiting on my visa still. Sucks, but
soon enough.
Yeah, soon enough. But from the training sessions, I've noticed it's definitely a faster pace. One that I feel very comfortable in. Like when I first showed up, I was obviously a little bit nervous because you don't really know what to expect, but I've honestly felt pretty at home in terms of the training environment. It's fast paced. The girls are aggressive. Aggressive. It is very direct, I've learned, but they still like to play, and the technical abilities of the players are, I found to be much more developed, because that's pretty much all they live, breathe, and do here in Iceland. So that's kind of what I've learned. And all the international players are pretty top quality too. So I'm really excited to play my first game after watching the girls play. I think it's a style of play that's going to be very well fitted for me, considering I know I'm like an in behind player. I know I like to attack space, and it looks like I'm going to have good opportunities.
That's great to hear. And your first match is April 26th against Selfoss. Holly, we really appreciate you taking the time today to jump on with us, and we wish you the best of luck for this first season in Iceland.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited. And I know that Aaron McLeod is here too now, so that'll be cool.
Exactly. That's kind of cool, like to follow a Canadian legend, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. You have a great rest of your day. Folks, we're going to take another break. On the other side, we're going to break down the MLS matches from last week and get into some previews for this week. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding down the fort solo today. Niko on training camp duty with York United, but he will be back next week. I hope. We'll see. I don't know. I'm assuming he'll be back next week. We'll find out next week. Great conversation we just had with Holly O'Neill of IBV in Iceland, newest Canadian signing in Europe. Great opportunity for her to really make a name for herself over there, as she mentioned. But we are now on MLS Week 2, folks. 2. Because last week, we got the season underway with a bang. And by bang, I mean all 3 Canadian teams doing not great. It was an ugly match for all 3 teams, unfortunately. And it was not what I expected. I had all 3 of them winning, so I'm 0 for 3 on the prediction segment. Not my best showing for sure. But we got lots of time to make it up, so don't worry, we will. Let's look at the games from last week, though, before we really talk about it here. Let's look back at what happened, and we're going to start with Montreal, because this was a game that it really did not go Montreal's way. They held more possession, don't get me wrong, but they didn't have that killer instinct. They had 6 shots on target, which is not bad, but most of the shots on target were just too easy. Goalie was able to make some really key saves for Miami, who, for their credit, had 7 and managed to pot 2. And 2-0 was probably a fair scoreline. Montreal did their best to try to come back in the second half, and they maintained a ton of possession in the second half. They don't have that killer instinct, and it's something that I was worried about when Kai Kamara mentioned that he wanted to move. Well, that's great, but you just lost one of the best goal scorers on your team. And I mean, credit to Montreal for allowing Kamara to move on and finding a trade that worked for them. But you lost one of the greatest goal scorers in MLS, stats-wise. He's gone. You lose him there. And that's an issue, because they don't have anybody who can fill that role. They really don't. The defense, the back 3 are back. They were okay, I guess, in this first match. Nothing special. It's just a lot of question marks for me after week 1 from Montreal. And that's not a good feeling heading into week 2. And they have an interesting match this week. They're playing Austin, who another team that maybe kind of disappointed in week 1, but if I'm looking at the 2 squads, I have more faith in Austin figuring it out before Montreal. And I hate saying that, because I want to see the Canadian teams do well, because the longer the Canadian teams do well, the more content we have, let's be honest. But week 1 was not the best showing for Montreal. That's really all I have to say on that game. And I hate that that is all I have to say. But hopefully they can turn it around for week 2. Another team with a disappointing, well, I mean, all 3 Canadian teams had a disappointing week, but TFC. Oh, boy. The past comes back to bite them again, because for some reason this team cannot seem to hold on to leads. I thought it was going to be different this year. We got Sean Johnson in net. You got Matt Hedges and Rusted at the back. I figured this team was going to be better defensively, and yet here we are blowing a 2-1 lead in the 90th minute. By the way, there's no way you should be losing a game when you're up 2-1 in the 85th plus. I understand if you give up a goal to tie the game, completely understand. Right? It happens. That's just the nature of the sport. It happens sometimes. But you cannot lose a match when up 2-1 in the 85th or later. That is not okay. That is not allowed. And yet TFC did it. They lost 3-2 on goals in the 90th and 90th plus. I don't know what else to say, because it's not okay. Like, this was what we brought Sean Johnson in. This is why they brought Matt Hedges. I keep saying we. I'm not on the team. I understand that. It's just bad habit. But this is why they brought these players in. This is why you brought the players in. And yes, I understand Insigne got hurt. Maybe that messes with the mental game a little bit. I get that. But that is not a good enough excuse to to lose a game when you're up in the 85th plus. 85th plus here, folks. This is not a recording from last season. This is the same thing that we are seeing from this TFC team. And I said it last week that they're not going to have problems scoring. Listen, if you want to take the over in all of their games, you're probably going to be right. From a betting perspective, take the over until further notice, because they don't seem to know how to defend, and they have a really good attack. Attacking-wise, they're fine. Even without Insigne, Bernardeschi has taken to the MLS better than Insigne has in the first 12 months. Ayo Akinola is there. Diamande's there. They have attacking players. The attack is not going to be their issue. They're going to put goals in. So take the over, because it's going to be like last year where they're winning games 4-3 or 3-2 or, God forbid, 5-4. This is where we're at right now with this squad, is that they cannot defend enough, and they're going to have to outscore their defensive woes. I thought that was figured out by adding the players that they did, but it looks like we're back to square one. And their match this week, they got an Atlanta United team who they're kind of in the same boat. They're a team that's going to have to outscore their problems, which isn't realistic for most of the season. Atlanta picked up a 2-1 win in week 1 against San Jose, who, let's be honest, is not going to have as good of a year as they did last year. And that's fine because they overachieved last year. But they're not a scrub. They're not a bottom of the table looking squad. So 2-1 win's good for them. And it's funny because I think in my head I'm still leaning towards TFC to get a result in this match, just because I think for a lot of the games they're going to be able to outscore some deficiencies. But you can't keep expecting to win games if you're leaking goals the way that they do. And they can't seem to not leak goals, which is a problem. A really, really bad problem. But again, just like Montreal, they dominated possession. They had 55%. So I shouldn't say dominate, but they owned possession. They had 55% possession. And even at the end of the game, they were hemmed in a little bit. But there were sections of that last 20 or so minutes where TFC had all the ball. So you can't tell me that they don't know how to control the ball or anything like that. They do. But when other teams get it in their mind that they can go and score against you, you're asking for problems. You're putting yourself in a really, really bad spot, because that's all the other team's going to want to do is push you back, and force you to make mistakes. And right now, TFC isn't good enough to avoid those mistakes. So I'll leave it at that. Vancouver, on the other side of the conferences, they also fell in a come-from-behind fashion as well, which it was a little disappointing. You can look at the timeline, and there's questions, right? I don't like seeing it, but they gave up 2 goals in the span of 3 minutes. First 60 minutes, they looked really, really good. First 60 minutes, they had great possession numbers. They got the early goal from Brown off of the set piece. It was a really positive start. And at half, everyone was saying, oh, this Vancouver team might not be as bad as we thought. And then for about a 10-minute stretch, it was all Real Salt Lake, who isn't a bad team, but I don't think they're going to be pushing for the top of the standings or anything. So you got to look at it and you're like, okay, well, we have some issues here. You can't be giving up 2 goals in a 5-minute stretch. Listen, if you give up 2 goals in a second half, like, I get it. Teams are pushing a little bit more, especially when they're down. You can't be turning off back-to-back. Can't be giving up 2 goals in 5 minutes. It's the same with TFC. The difference is I don't think Vancouver has the horses to outscore their problems this year. So they have to really lock it down defensively. And again, for probably 60 minutes of this game, they did. They did a good job playing that kind of style. They actually had more shots than Real Salt Lake. Their passing was significantly better. Even the possession numbers, they had 55% too. All 3 Canadian teams had more possession than their opponent, and yet all 3 are coming out on the losing end this past week. So we got lots of questions, lots of concerns for all 3 squads. Hopefully it was an anomaly week. Hopefully it was just week 1 jitters. But we're going into this week 2, and I think there's a couple players on each team that are in a prove to me what you got standpoint right now. No one's really safe from that perspective. So there's going to be some questions, and I look at it personally. Out of the 3 teams, Vancouver might have looked the most consistent. TFC looked good for most of the game. I mean, they were up 2-1. In the 83rd minute, they scored to go up 2-1. They didn't look great. They didn't look like world beaters by any stretch. So one of these teams is going to have to really, well, all 3 of them are really going to have to take a step forward if they want to even push for playoffs. I had TFC in the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. After that week 1, I don't know if I still have them up there. I still think that they will make playoffs because they do have enough attacking presence. But Vancouver and Montreal, they were on the inside of the playoffs last time I looked. I think I have them just outside the playoffs right now. I know it's week 1. I'm trying not to overreact, and that's why I say maybe they drop down a spot or 2. All 3 of them drop down a spot or 2. We'll see how it goes over the next couple weeks. I understand that it is them trying to figure out their new style, figure out their new teammates. I get it, but you got to get it figured out quick in this league because we saw from TFC last year, their second half was a lot better, but they were too far behind in the first half. They were so far behind in the standings, they couldn't make up enough wins in order to sneak into the playoff spot. So we'll have to see how it plays out. On the other side, we are going to give our predictions. And yes, Niko sent me his predictions. He actually sent me a video. So I will play the audio for you on TSN 1050. You're listening to Footy First. Well, welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding it down solo today as Niko is in training camp. But, folks, it is time now for our prediction segment. Last week did not go very well for either myself or Niko. I personally went 0 for 3. Yes, I know, not good. Not good at all. And Niko pulled out a win because he did have Inter Miami beating Montreal. But other than that, he went 1-2. So we got a lot of work to do. And Niko was kind enough to send me his predictions for this week. But before we get to those, let me give you the 3 games that Canadian teams are playing in. TFC, as I already mentioned, is playing Atlanta today at 7:30. You got Montreal playing off against Austin at 8:30, and then Vancouver against San Jose at 10:30 tonight. Some great matches. Let's get to the predictions, and Niko is going to get us started with all 3 of his.
Good morning, Footy First fans. First, I'd like to apologize for not being on the show today. I'm unfortunately in Pittsburgh, so I couldn't make it. But my picks for predictions this week, I got Toronto FC. They're going to get a draw. First point of the year. Not too bad. And Sydney's still out. The next game, I got Montreal. Then, unfortunately, I feel like they might lose this week, so we'll go with that. And then Vancouver's also going to get a draw, 1-1. And those are my predictions. Next week, I'll be back on the show. See you guys then.
So there you have it. He's got a draw for TFC, a Montreal loss, and a Vancouver 1-1 draw, as Vancouver San Jose is our game of the week. I guess for me, I'm going to go, this TFC match, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'm going to go with the TFC win. I'm debating between a draw and a win, but I'm going to go with a TFC win. We're going to stick to it. TFC win against Atlanta. Montreal, I agree with Nico. I think Austin is going to get out a win in this one. I have more faith that they're going to bounce back as opposed to TFC. Austin did lose 3-2 to the newest club, St. Louis City, in week 1. But they played well. St. Louis looks to be a good team, so it's going to be interesting to see how they pan out. Vancouver San Jose game of the week. I have Vancouver winning this one. I have it a 2-1 scoreline. Again, they looked good for a large portion of their first match. Just need to hold on for that 5-minute stretch, and they probably get a result last week. I think they get the win this week, 2-1 in San Jose. It will be a fun match. Folks, that'll do it for this week. We appreciate you joining us as always. We really appreciate Holly O'Neill for jumping on with us earlier today. Next week, we will recap week 2 of the MLS action. Also dive a little bit deeper into the Canadian soccer controversy, issue, saga, whatever you want to call it. We'll get into that a little bit deeper next week as well. And Nico will be back with me on next week's show, so that will be fantastic. If you missed any of today's episode, you can listen to it on your favorite pod catcher. Footy First episode 49 is the episode you are looking for. If you want to go back and find Holly O'Neill's interview, you can also check it out as well. You can look us up on YouTube. This episode, as well as all of our interviews and prediction segment, will be posted later this weekend. As always, we really do appreciate you joining us here on TSN 1050 and on Footy First. For Nico, I'm Nick. We'll see you next time.